for the Monday, October 17th, 2016 special town meeting. I'm Bob Price. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Westford, and I'm joined by Kelly Ross, Chair, Board of Selectmen, Eric Heidemann, who is our new Assistant Town Manager, and Ellen Hardy, Town Moderator. We're here to discuss the 12 motions on the warrant for the upcoming special town meeting and to discuss any issues that you might have. Kelly, one of the things about this warrant is, in fact, what is absent from it, and that's the discussion of the Drew's Garden project. Can you say just a few words about the status of that?
Sure. Just very briefly, if you had been following along, at the time we closed the warrant, there was an article related to amending the agricultural preservation restriction. But when we got to signing the warrant at our last meeting, the owner of the property requested that we remove that from the warrant, and the selectmen agreed that that was a good idea to remove it from the warrant, so we did so. There still is on the warrant, though, Article 1, which is to petition the general court for an additional all-alcohol on-premises license for that property, 66 Boston Road, the Drew parcel. Because it was a citizen petition, by law, we could not remove it from the warrant. It had to remain on, and so it remains part of this town meeting. But my understanding is that the proponent of the citizen petition will be, he's already indicated he will be asking to withdraw this article as well once we get to town meeting, or dismiss it once we get to town meeting.
Okay, so let's go to Article 2. Approve.
Could I
Yes.
say something on that one?
My understanding is that
And move this over?
That's fine.
Is it? That'll pick me up? Okay. I'm Marion Harmon, Chamberlain Road. I'm gratified to hear that this Article 1 may be removed by, this petition article may be removed. If it's not, I really would like to encourage everyone to come out to town meeting and vote this down, because there is to be no restaurant as far as we know at this point. So a liquor license for a non-existent restaurant would be quite inappropriate. So I just would like to encourage people to still come out. We don't know that this, for sure, that this is going to be withdrawn from the warrant. Thank you.
May I speak to that, Bob? From a parliamentary standpoint, if the petitioner or one of the people who signed the petition doesn't make a motion to withdraw, any voter in the room can make a motion to dismiss it. So it's not, it doesn't, once it's before the town meeting, it doesn't belong to the petitioner anymore. It belongs to the meeting. So if it actually comes before the body, then the voters have the option to make the motion to dismiss.
Could I just ask for clarification? Sorry. So by removing it, that means that there is no longer the intent to have a restaurant at that, is that what this means? What does this mean?
I think the owner is not prepared to bring something forward to this October town meeting. I think he has indicated he would like to still consider some possible option for a future town meeting, but it is not part of this town meeting.
Thank you.
Anything else? Article 2. Approved unpaid bills from previous fiscal years.
All right, so Article 2 is to appropriate from the water enterprise retained earnings the amount of $2,231.05. This is to pay a bill that was unpaid from prior fiscal year to DG Solar, which was related to net metering credits. The vendor had not invoiced the town in a timely fashion, so we are just looking to appropriate the funds to pay a past invoice.
Ellen, can you explain why it's a 9/10 vote?
That's the wisdom of the state legislature. To pay a bill from the previous fiscal year requires a 9/10 vote of the voters present at town meeting. It's a very delicate count.
High standard.
Article 3. Approved fiscal year 2017 budget adjustments.
Okay, this is going to raise and appropriate the sum of $108,853. This is broken down as follows. 210 police personal services, $62,853. This is a result of the Joint Labor Management Committee award. We had budgeted for FY16 and carried that cost, but this is the cost associated with FY17.
Can I ask you, Eric, what personal services are?
Personnel services are, that's personnel, but it's
Salary?
correct.
Thank you.
The next item is 432 recycling expenses for $46,000. As many of you are likely aware, our previous recycling vendor, IPR, is no longer with us, and we had to rebid the service under MGL Chapter 30B, and we now have Republic Services, so that is the cost associated with the new rebidding of that contract.
Can I ask a recycling question?
Oh, I guess so, since we have a recycling authority here.
When we put our 5-cent cans and bottles in the recycling, does the company take them out and redeem them?
No, because those are aluminum, and that's the most valuable product that you're putting in your curbside. So they actually bundle those and sell them as an aluminum, so they get the money for it.
Does the town get any break depending on how much aluminum is there?
No, we don't. When the town, and I'm speaking now as a member of the Recycling Commission, this is not a moderator area, but I do recycle as moderator. So when we first started recycling back in the 1980s, we did in fact get paid for different commodities, and we got weights of how much paper and how much metal we did. That disappeared, I would say, Denali, probably in the late 2000s. The bookkeeping, because of the volume when we were recycling, became more complicated. So what the contractor did at that point was simply, rather than us paying them Y and then having them pay the town back based on how much aluminum and paper they sold, they simply bid a lower number to sort of offset that. So the net cost to the town was the same. And that's the way it's continued for the last decade, and that's the way the new Republic contract works. There's no provision in it, as I recall, Eric, that the town is paid if they recycle more aluminum or if they
You're
recycle
correct.
more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more adjustments?
So the next one is to appropriate from free cash the amount of $115,000. These are one-time costs. This is why it's broken out from the first group. The first would be the Public Safety Communications Personnel Services. This is related to the consolidation of our police and fire dispatching services. So that's something that's still ongoing now. There's a lot of cross-training that's involved with that. So we are seeking an additional $60,000 to finalize the cross-training required for the consolidation. Item 220, Fire Personnel Services. We currently have 2 captains out on medical leave, and as a result, we've had to backfill positions and also bring on 1 temporary position to fill the void. So that's what these funds are associated with. Item 294, Tree Warden Expenses for $8,000. I'll speak to this a little later as well. This is related to Article 6. We are going to be requesting at the town meeting to establish a revolving account for the Town Forestry Commission to begin selective tree trimming, which we've already started this fiscal year, which actually generates revenue for the town and also allows the town to selectively trim trees to promote healthy forests on our town properties. The next item is to appropriate from the Water Enterprise retained earnings to the Water Enterprise fiscal year 2017 personnel services, the amount of $18,823. This is contractual adjustments and a forecast for union negotiations, which are currently taking place. And the next is the town to appropriate ambulance enterprise retained earnings to the ambulance enterprise fiscal year 2017 personnel services in the amount of $23,500. Again, this is related to those 2 fire captains that are out and backfilling those positions while they're out on medical leave.
One note, there's a typo in this, that it says Water Enterprise earning to the Ambulance Enterprise.
Yeah, I apologize. We've corrected that already.
Okay, all right.
But thank you for letting us know.
Good eyes, Laura. Any questions on those?
Yeah, I have a question. Are these expenses going to increase the homeowners' taxes? All these?
No. By law, under Proposition 2.5, we can raise our levy limit by 2.5% every year, and we do that every year, and this all will fit within that levy limit.
If you look at the source of where these come from in the budget, for example, just the ones that Eric just read, one is to appropriate from free cash, and that's basically surplus that was left over from the previous fiscal year. You might have appropriated $100,000 for a department and they only spent $95,000. That comes back, and that's available for town meeting to spend, not for anyone else. And the others are actually transfers within accounts. So we appropriated a certain amount for the ambulance enterprise fund that they've earned, and we're transferring it. So it's not more tax money, it's moving money from one place, one pot to another that's already been authorized.
Would that be true of all these expenses in the whole warrant tonight?
Fall town meeting, is that true? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And just something, I'll just take just a minute to point out if it's okay. For the last couple of years, something we've been working on for many years was to have our revenue match our expenses. And for the longest time, our revenues were not quite keeping up with our expenses, and we would really have to take money out of reserves or find other means to balance the budget. But for last year and the current year, we have achieved a balanced budget, and we're trying to stay there.
Good job.
Article 4, approve fiscal year 2017 budget transfers. Could someone please explain the difference between budget adjustments and budget transfers?
Budget transfer would be moving money from one department to another or one budget line item to another, whereas a budget adjustment typically involves taking money out of free cash, as Eric explained on the prior article.
So to speak to this one, this is a capital appropriation that occurred in last annual town meeting in 2016. That was Article 7 for wastewater management capital appropriation for Westford Academy and Christopher School leach field testing. This is going to be reapplied to the compliance modifications to the Westford Academy wastewater treatment plant and other related costs. So we're working with the Mass DEP, and we want to ensure we're in compliance. The original proposed project was to install a leach field. A leach field was not accepted, so we are now working with the Mass DEP to come up with a solution that's going to be in compliance. So these funds will be reapplied to do upgrades at our wastewater treatment facilities.
No questions. Article 5, approve fiscal year 2017 capital appropriations.
This would be to appropriate from free cash the sum of $80,000 for two projects, both related to the engineering department. The first one is for $30,000. It's for the appraisal of the easements of the Oak Hill Road and Groton Road intersection improvements. And the second is for $50,000 for the design of the complete streets prioritization projects. With this project, we're anticipating to utilize the design to apply for state grant funding, which we're estimating to receive upwards of $400,000.
What does complete streets mean?
Complete Streets is a program to improve vehicle and pedestrian and bicycle safety, and the projects that would be designed under this $50,000 are a sidewalk on Concord Road in the vicinity of the Robinson School, and a couple in town center.
Correct.
One would be, is it for the bump out by the First Parish Church?
Yes, exactly.
Is one,
At
and
the
I'm trying to
intersection.
remember what the other one
Lincoln
is.
Street. I believe that the third one is the one that would go across Boston Road from the Civil War Monument
Right.
to the Common. Another one to try and
Crosswalk.
improve pedestrian safety in the center. Yeah. The Complete Streets is a new project that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has just introduced. I think it's its first year. So Paul Starrett, our town engineer, and the Sidewalk Pedestrian Safety Committee, is that
Yes,
what it's
yes.
called? are sort of trying to get in on the ground floor of this to prioritize some Westford projects of a long list that they have, to do these first and try and get some of this first funding. But we have to apply for the grant. I think they've done the first round already, and that's been accepted, and we have to
Right,
do
and appropriating this engineering money is a requirement to apply for the grant.
Right.
I'd like to put in a word for the Oak Hill Groton Road intersection, which happens to be one of the most dangerous ones in town. It's important to me because I go through there very often. The police chief has a number of occasions said how bad this intersection is, so I'm glad to see we're making progress on it.
So this is to signalize to ultimately put traffic signals
Sure.
at that intersection.
It's all part of the same
Right.
package. Article 6, authorize revolving fund.
So I spoke to this earlier. This is the revolving funds related to the town forest management with the tree clearing. Where the $8,000 that was mentioned earlier is actually seed money to get this up and off the ground. So this is a revolving fund account that will be utilized to hold the revenue that comes in from clearing of the trees, and that revenue will be utilized to continue operations forward.
And we've already done forestry work on the Spalding Forest.
Correct. I can't speak to the name of the forest, maybe. I don't know the forest name, but I know we've done some clearing on the wood line near the water department.
That's the one.
Okay.
And I think
I'd like to,
You can go first.
well, I think I'd like to comment on this at town meeting. You know, there's two ways of looking at forestry on the subject of, is it good for the forest? Does it make the forest healthier or not? My view, and this is after years and years of being involved in this sort of issue, I feel that it doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. So anyway, I'd like to not say that now, but I'd like to comment on that at the town meeting. Would that be all right?
Actually, can I comment on your wanting to comment on
Yes.
All this is doing is establishing a revolving fund, and we're not talking about the pros and cons of having the tree clearing.
I
So in
see.
point of fact, I would rule that out of order.
Ooh.
And what I would do would be that suggest that you go to the next meeting of the Town Forest Committee, because they are the group that are making these decisions about when to cut and where to cut, and they are going to be the ones that make that decision. The town meeting isn't voting on it on the night of the 17th, Bill, so for that reason, it
You
really would
answered
not
my
be.
question, thank you.
But I would be glad to get to the schedule for the Town Forest. Hugh McGuire is the chair of the
I know
Town
Hugh.
Forest Committee.
Okay.
And he could tell you when they're meeting next and if they're planning other projects, so you can have input to that.
I do have a question. Where does the money come from? Please explain that to me. For the forest, town,
So
tree warden.
You mean the work that's already been done?
No, you said that we're establishing this as seed money, and they will be having income. Where does their income come from?
from the sale of the wood that's removed from the forest.
Oh, okay, thank you.
question.
I know that there have been a move away from revolving accounts, so this just rises to the level of thinking that this is worth it to separate this money out. I'm just curious, because I know we used to have like a lot, and then they started saying, oh, well, we're not going to do so many. So I'm just curious. I'm always curious when a new one shows up, like, why?
Yeah, and it's always a difficult balance. The pros of having a revolving fund is it allows, an operation like this to continue where they are, potentially selling wood, making money, but then they have some expenses for maintaining forest lands. So it makes it easier for a department to manage a situation where money is coming and going. The negative of it is, there's a little bit, it's more distributed, it's not as centralized under our finance department, and so it's a little bit more of a challenge to keep on top of it and make sure that it's functioning as designed. But we've had pretty good success with several years ago, we eliminated many revolving funds, and we've been very judicious about adding them back in, and so far it's worked out pretty well.
So I have another question. I have one question regarding back to Bill's comment about the town forest committee. How long has that committee been in existence?
Since the 1950s.
So was it back then that the town decided it was in our best interest to do this from a land perspective and to address Bill's question? Or how did?
This particular farming of the Oscar Spaulding Town Forest was a new project just initiated by the current Town Forest Committee within the last year. And it's the first time in my memory, actually, that we have done this kind of work in the town forest in a very long period of time. So it's a new initiative, and I wish I could say that this town meeting would be the proper time to have that discussion.
That's fine.
Let me ponder that between now and the 17th, but, because, truthfully, the concept of setting up the revolving account, the voters want to know what the revolving account is being used for and where it's being transferred to. So there may be a slight wiggle room, but we can't have a huge discussion and a vote on whether or not we go forward with the Oscar Spaulding Town Forest project on the 17th. That's way beyond this. So let me talk to Hugh McGuire about that and see if perhaps we could just have one statement or something like that to.
How about the possibility of a resolution to be added to the town meeting?
A resolution is always accepted at town meeting. That would be very
Can it
appropriate.
be presented right on that same day?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Either before or after this discussion. As you know, a resolution voted by the town meeting is not binding, but it does give a sense of the meeting. So that would be an excellent way to see if the other voters are feeling.
Are there deadlines for that now?
Absolutely none. No, you
No.
can do it on the fly. I mean, the moderator really does appreciate it if you don't. But if something just came to you during the meeting, it has to be in writing so that I have it and can get it up on the screen for all of the voters. But there is nothing, with the warrant of the town meeting, we must by law post that a certain time before the meeting. That's not true with a resolution, because for those two reasons, it is merely a sense of the meeting and it's not binding, and therefore the law does not require the advance notice to all the voters.
For fear of restating the obvious, let me just say that the creation of this revolving fund and the deposit of the seed money really indicates that the Forestry Commission intends to do further clearing work. So maybe he would like to say something at town
Yep,
meeting.
that would certainly be an appropriate question.
So can I ask then, if those individuals that feel that it's inappropriate to harvest timber could vote against the creation of this revolving account, would that effectively prohibit or hamper the harvesting of trees?
Should we take a vote on this?
I would say, they still would have it in their authority to continue that operation, but I would say if town meeting were to vote this down, and, the discussion indicates the reason they're voting this down is they don't like that kind of operation taking place, I would hope they would listen to that.
Anything else on the trees?
Well, let me just continue that line of thought. So if it was voted down, they could still continue to cut as they wanted to, sell the wood, but then they'd have to put it in the general fund, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's it? Okay. Article 7, amend the wage and classification plan.
Okay, and we are looking to amend the pay classification for one non-union municipal employee. That is a new position that was created for a current employee. This is the Assistant Town Accountant in Finance and Budget Analyst. This is to provide support for both our Town Accountant and our Finance Director, and also have some backup support for when there's vacancies within either of the departments, having some cross-training for that individual.
Eric, would you add to the warrant, and we should have discussed this afternoon, that not only the voters know how the Selectmen and the Finance Committee feel on this, but the Personnel Advisory Committee's positions should be noted in the motion sheet so that people know.
Absolutely.
Have supported. Have they voted on this, Kelly? Do
I
you know
believe
if
they
have?
support it.
Okay, thank you.
Article 8, authorize selectmen to enter a lease for the office and programming space of the Parks, Recreation, and Cemetery departments.
So this is a two-part, which we might be modifying after we had our motions meeting today. But if you're not familiar, our Parks, Recreation, and Cemetery departments are currently in the basement of our Rogers Fire Station. And this article is related to leasing space from the Courier Building, formerly known as R.R. Donnelly Printing Facility at 22 Farm Road, both office and programming space for a 5-year term with an option to extend for 5 additional years. And part 2 of this would be the startup costs associated with the lease, as well as some one-time costs such as upgrading data lines required for computer systems, some miscellaneous furniture that's required, and just want to note that the actual annual lease for the property is $3,000 a month. So the $21,000 is in the item 40 out of the $46,235. $21,000 is the prorated amount for this current fiscal year.
So,
When you anticipate this work would happen, then, if this gets passed at town meeting?
We are working with the current owner, well, the person that's in the process of purchasing this property. Once they become the legal owner of the property, we already have a bid response from them. We put this out under Chapter 30B for a real property, and we had a review committee and ultimately decided that this was the best proposal for the town and for this department. Now, once he takes legal ownership of that property, we can effectively have a lease agreement with them and start moving in as soon as possible. We'd like to do it before the snow hits the ground, but we'll see how, weather permitting.
Denali?
Okay, so that's $231,175 for 5 years, if the rent doesn't go up during that 5 years. So I'm really concerned about the old town farm building. Our school department was in there for years, and evidently they didn't bother to maintain the building. And I hear that the building is in such terrible shape, the town has been talking about selling it. Do we still own it?
We still own it.
We still own it, okay.
We voted at town meeting to authorize the selectmen to sell it.
I remember that, and I didn't like it
Clarify
then
that.
either, and I still don't.
No, I just wanted to let everyone know.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm being curmudgeonly.
No, you're not.
So, why don't we fix up the town farm building?
We had an estimate on the cost of that, and I'm trying to remember what that number was.
Over $4 million.
Yeah, it was over $4 million.
Okay, so how long are we going to be leasing?
Well, first of all, the
It's a
$46,000...
$250,000.
The $46,000 figure here is not entirely for the lease. It also covers one-time expenses that Eric described, like upgrading for computer systems and that sort of thing. So the rent is not that amount entirely. The idea here, and then we'll get to this in an article later on, the Recreation Commission still would like to pursue building a building for their department. And there's a feasibility study that would, funding that they would like to pursue that with. So,
But they cost more than $4 million.
Well, that remains to be seen exactly what that proposal would be. But I think they would say Town Farm is not an ideal location for a recreation department. That, I think they have visions of potentially having like an indoor basketball court, for instance, which you probably could not do in Town Farm very easily. The idea is to lease the space for 5 years. They figure it would take a minimum of 5 years to pursue a new building if the town supports that. But if the town doesn't support that, then there's the option in here to continue the lease for another 5 years.
And of course, we have the problem of where are they going to find some land on which to put it? Maybe next to the highway garage. Which is, I'm sorry, it's a bit of sarcasm, but that's a real problem, finding a space to put anything.
Yeah, there's space in the vicinity of the Stony Brook School and the Veterans Memorial Complex that I think is of interest to them. But yeah, that would certainly be an important question, is where would it go?
Thank you.
So as I understand it, we're entering into an agreement for 5 years, and that's motion number 1. And motion So we're locked into that agreement for 5 years, but we're only going to provide funding under motion 2 for the first year? Is that how I
That's all we
read
can
this?
do.
I could break it out a little further.
Sure, go ahead.
So the $46,000 that you see on the second motion, so the $3,000 a month is the rent.
Right.
So we had that prorate that for this fiscal year, because up to June 30th. And the remaining costs that you'll see associated with that, we have utilities.
Right, no, I understand what the motion reads. It's the logic that says we're entering into an agreement. In motion 1, we're handshaking, but motion 2 says we're only going to pay you for the first year, startup costs and the rent. I'm just questioning that. Is that what we agreed to?
Well, and yeah, and that's not that unusual. For instance, when we issue a bond, we might commit to a 20-year bond for something, but then we appropriate the bond payment each year annually for the 20 years. You can think of it similar to that. So yeah, this would come back in future town meetings to pay the rent if this is approved. And if in a future town meeting, the voters decided they did not want to pay the rent, that would be interesting.
Well, they may. We all have short memories, so I can easily see that happening.
Ellen?
Thank you.
Am I correct in assuming that motion 1, motion 2 are voted on separately?
They will be, although we had a meeting this afternoon with town council. And he is going back to determine whether or not the second motion might require 2/3 as well. He was reading the state statute and trying to interpret it, because if in fact you were just doing a lease and you were funding it all in one motion,
Right.
that would require the 2/3. So when we get to town meeting, actually we'll know this tomorrow, we'll certainly let the voters know, it may turn out that there's a single motion that requires 2/3 vote and it won't be separated. We're still checking, council is following up on
Thank you.
that.
Nothing else? Article 9, this always brings cheers to the floor of town meeting. Reduce amount raised by taxes in fiscal year 2017.
So this is the town that transfer the following available funds to reduce the net amount to be raised for taxes in the fiscal year. It's $26,906.63 from the fund balance designated for debt exclusion reduction. So as Kelly had mentioned, we didn't use any free cash to balance the budget. This is our second year with a balanced budget, so this is a good article to see.
I just want to clarify that every year, though, we increase our tax revenue by 2.5%.
That's correct. Every year, every year our existing property tax goes up 2.5% globally town-wide. An individual homeowner might see a number greater or less than that. Plus, new construction adds more tax revenue on top of that.
Thank you.
Article 10, acceptance of schematic design for the J.B. Fletcher Library.
This
I
is-
was going to say something as library trustee, but I see there's a higher authority in
So this is,
So-
you want to speak to this one?
Sure.
That'd be
I'm
great.
Ellen Rainville, the library director, and this is a request from the town to continue us on a path to pursue a second grant. For the past 2 years, the elected Board of Library Trustees and members of the Permanent Town Building Committee have administered and executed a planning and design grant from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. That's the state agency that oversees public libraries within the Commonwealth. The town meeting voted twice to match the $50,000 grant at former town meetings, and over the last 24 months, the Library Facility Needs Committee has met all the hallmarks of that grant and will be bringing to town meeting a request to allow us to pursue yet another grant. The language in this motion is very specific and provided to us by the Board of Library Commissioners. It may cause a tinge of anxiety, seeming to promise us to more than it does, but it's asking town meeting to buy into the design, which keeps the historic facade on the common. We will only look like a 21st century library from the rear as you walk into the new rear from the parking lot. I will have, a PowerPoint and data to support this, but the most important thing is we need a supportive vote to write a public library construction grant. That's due January 26th of 2017. We anticipate we will be one of 35 municipalities competing for this state money. We won't know what our ranking might be until July 17th. The costs that we have estimated assume that we will be waitlisted for 4 years, and we will, because the town has been supportive, because our library has been well-maintained, we assume we will be waiting for our name to come up. And only when we're told that Westford is a provisional grantee, then the town has 6 months to vote money. So at some point in the future, and this future date is beyond our control, the town would have to vote to support the construction grant funding, or whatever portion, and also have a debt exclusion vote. So we're assuming that maybe by 2020, we would be waitlisted. We would come back to the town. The cost in 2020 would be about $12 million for the town, with an $8 million grant from the Board of Library Commissioners. That would be town people's tax money that we would be recapturing for our town. And at that point, it would cost a homeowner approximately $94 a year, or $1.80 a month. And we would be increasing the library in size by just a little bit over 50%, and kind of filling in that back crenellation. So again, all this allows us to do is spend 3 months writing a grant, making the deadline, and vying with other communities for those funds that would be available to communities within the state.
But you're not asking for any money.
This is a non-financial article. Again, this is really a request to allow us to submit a grant and compete for a placement with these other communities, hoping to enlarge, rebuild, and at least one library is having a major route go through its current site. So they will probably be higher on the wait list than us. So again, we have been methodically working actually since 2001 report, and this is the next step, and it does not oblige the town to anything except my grant writing and some photocopying of grant materials.
Just a quick question. Ellen, are you planning to go through, to use those words at town and throw out the $9 million?
Well, that will be on the PowerPoint. I mean, I think when people hear building, they want to know what's the cost. And again, now the good thing about waiting 4 years is by the time we would be paying off, or the first bills would come, the town has quite a large drop in its debt exclusion obligations around 2024. So, we have been planning that, this would coincide with a drop in the debt exclusion payments, because a number of town buildings will be paid off. So even though it costs, $1.80 a month, a taxpayer may not really feel the impact in their tax bill, depending, of course, on what happens in the 6 years between. The town may take on other obligations. But people want to know, if I'm buying it, what is the cost, and what is the value, and what is the benefit?
So where can somebody go to see the design?
Well, right now, and all this summer, the designs have been up in the browsing room of the library, We'll definitely have all of the large renderings in the hallway at Fall Town Meeting, and they'll be in overheads in a PowerPoint. But if you would like to see them up close and personal, coming in the Main Street entrance and going to that fireplace room, you'll see all of them there.
Thank you.
Can I say, thank you so much, Ellen. You provide this town with such a fabulous library, fabulous service. Thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't have said it.
Thank you for being a trustee.
That's good, you too, Bob.
Any other questions for Ellen? Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate that. Article 11, approve Community Preservation Committee recommendations.
So these are for two different projects to be funded through community preservation funds. The first is related to what we discussed earlier, the recreation department lease. So that was kind of our short-term, if you want to call it, solution to a problem we have. Long-term, we're looking at a recreation feasibility study for $125,000, which is going to look at long-term needs for the town. Item number 2 is $50,000 for the installation of a deep well and pump shed at the Graniteville Road Community Gardens. I know I need to fix the wording on that, Ellen, which I will. And that one is sponsored or submitted by the Agricultural Commission.
If I could just say a couple words as a member of the Community Preservation Committee. That committee does not normally like to sponsor projects at Fall Town Meeting. They'd rather wait until the spring. But since both of these are very timely, we want to get going on the Parks and Recreation facility. And goodness knows the farmers want to have water available for the spring planting. So these two items appear in the CPC article. The Agricultural Commission, I think, has been the victim of its own success. There's a waiting list for people wanting to use the land, so there's talk of expansion. And I guess they really need a more robust source of water. Any questions?
You can always count on me if you have questions.
Ellen.
How much money does the CPC have currently, and how much do you gain every year approximately?
Well, the rate is, I believe, 3.5%.
No.
3% surtax on your property tax.
Correct.
And I do not remember how much cash we have on hand, but that's an excellent question to ask. And it's always asked at town meeting.
If Dan O'Donnell had been here, he would have rattled it off in a second, but I don't have that information either.
Thank
So
you.
just
I
to
will-
let Dan know what to bring on the 17th, Denali, you want to know the balances in all three accounts for historical, for open space, as well as for housing, the three accounts that we set aside.
Oh, sure, that'd be great.
Well, I mean, we may as well have Dan.
Might as well, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll be sure that he brings.
I wasn't even aware that they are broken out separately.
That's the state statute requires that 1/3 be set aside for housing, 1/3 be set aside for open space, and 1/3 be set aside for historical preservation.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
But
Laura?
these are coming from the undesignated fund balance, so at which one of the three buckets is this money coming out of?
I think actually it's 15% out. 15% has to go to the three categories, and the rest goes to undesignated.
Daniel Down will tell us.
Okay.
But certainly, everything.
We will find out at town meeting tomorrow.
Everything that CPC sponsors is in one of the three categories.
we'll get that resolved for you.
Okay. Article 12. Accept Clare Circle as a public way.
So just as you mentioned, the town's going to accept the layout of Clare Circle as a public way. This was paid through a betterment process.
You want to define that for people who don't know that term?
So I can define it better than I can.
No,
Kelly can
So
do that.
this will be paid for by a betterment process. That's a charge assessed to the residents of Clare Circle for the improvements, and so the town engineer has reported that those improvements meet town standards, and Clare Circle can be accepted as a public way.
What part of town is
Yeah,
it in?
thank you.
It's,
What part of town?
next to the new NAB school, on Plain Road, off Plain Road.
Thank
What's the gist of the improvements?
Speaking from personal experience, it's a very flat piece of ground. It's prone to flooding. So they put in better drainage for this. And we actually voted on this in the 2015 town meeting, annual town meeting, to approve the betterment plan.
Usually the way this comes about, Kathy, is that the residents of the road live on an unimproved road, and many of them are in the Nabnasset section of town. So they come to the town and say, we'd like to bring our road up to the standards of everybody else's town so they don't flood. And the town says, we'll do the work for you, but you will have to, everybody on the street has to agree that they want it done, or maybe it's 90% of them
We
have
said
to do it.
80%, but
Yeah,
I'm not
a certain
sure.
percentage of all the people, so one person can't say, I'd really like my road improved, and the other people say, I love it the way it is. And then, as Kelly just explained, the people who live on the street actually pay for it. There's a lien put on their property, I think it's for 20 years, so they pay it off by paying a little bit more in property taxes. So the town's part is to make sure that they build it to town specs, and the homeowners, the residents, people who live on the streets part is to pay for it. So the town actually isn't paying for it. The people who live on that street are paying for it. And it's called the Betterment Program. I think we adopted this back sometime in the 1950s or something to slowly bring the older roads in town that
And that's it?
were nowhere near up to code, because most of them were just small summer camps in Nabnasset, and they were dirt roads, to be able to bring those up to be passable and plowable, and passable by ambulances.
And there is still at least one dirt road there.
Yep.
And
Well, there's
there
some
might be
residents who
more.
like it, because that means nobody goes down their road, so it's different philosophy.
Any other questions or issues you want to raise?
I'd like to raise the quorum issue. We won't have a town meeting if there aren't 200 voters there at 7:30 on the 17th of October. We can't, one person said to me, well, my article isn't until Article 7, so can I come at about 8:15? And I said, well, you can, but if 200 voters are not there, we cannot start until we have 200 voters. So if some people decide to waltz in at 8:15, we won't start until 8:15. As a rule, if the meeting's posted for 7:30, the world of cell phones now means people can call neighbors and say, please come and help us do a quorum. But we don't wait more than about 20 minutes. If we don't have somebody by 200 people by 10 minutes of 8, it means that there are 200 of the 11,000 registered voters who care enough to hold that town meeting. There are things on this warrant that, although they may not sound exciting, are very crucial to the town's financial year, and allow the assessors to set the tax rate for the coming year. So please bring a friend, as the league says, bring a neighbor in there, and so we can have 200 voters there at 7:30 and begin on time and have a good discussion about all 12 articles.
Thank you.
So it's just the wording, a public way. So it's accepting that it's a public way. What does that mean, public way?
I guess the practical impact of this is if Clare Circle is accepted as a public way, that means the town will start to take responsibility for maintaining it. So doing repairs, fixing potholes, plowing the road.
So they pay for the road, but then the town maintains it? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so the residents there paid a betterment to bring the road up to standard, and then the town then takes responsibility for maintaining the road from there on.
Okay, that completes the discussion. All that remains is for you, the voters, to come to the special town meeting. It will be held Monday, October 17th at the Abbot School Gym. And we'll begin, hopefully, at 7:30. In the meantime, you can view copies of the motions on the town website under Town Meeting and Budget. And of course, hard copies of the motions will be available at the special town meeting in June. Thanks to Kelly Ross, Eric Heidemann, Ellen Hardy for participating in this warrant preview. It was sponsored by the League of Women Voters as part of its voter education program. That's it.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.